In this series, we're looking back on history to see those bands that most people consider to be sellouts because they sold their souls to a major record label, okay? So far, we've covered bands like Green Day, Blink-182, Jawbreaker, that type of thing. Today's band, you saw it in the thumbnail, you saw it in the title, it's At the Drive-In, one of my personal favorites. Hey everybody, how's it going? It's your friendly neighborhood gatekeeper Dan Frampton here, and today I'm gonna mention to you why these guys did not sell out, okay? Our story starts in the mid to late 90s over here, where we got El Paso, Texas, all right? We got Jim Ward and Cedric. I'm not gonna say the last names because I butcher them every single time, but Jim Ward and Cedric start this little band known as At the Drive-In, okay? Then they recruit 3 other guys, and now they're a 5-piece over here. When most people think about At the Drive-In, they think about the chaotic performances. They talk about the technical wizardry, but most importantly, they talk about these huge afros, okay? And they got super made fun of back in the time where they were rocking these things, but they rocked them with purpose and for a reason, okay? But when the band first started, they didn't have their signature afros yet. But these 5 dudes, when they came together, they were 5 very different guys, okay? They brought a lot of different diverse ideas to the band, and that's what made them so unique. But the one thing that tied them all together was their love for Dischord Records and everything Ian MacKaye has ever touched, okay? And maybe that inspiration is kind of what gave them the inspiration of being kind of going forward, kind of uptight little snobs. And it was that structure, it was that spectacle, that wild man chaotic energy that drew people to this band. And not only were they just the craziest on stage, jumping on, climbing over, doing anything they can to be as crazy as possible on stage, they were also technical wizards. You had Cedric and Omar, the guys that would be the guitar player and the vocalist with the big hairs. They would be going craziest, while the other guys, Jim and the gang, would be holding everything together. They scraped $600 together and put out this really quick project called Acrobatic Tenement. But when Bob Becker from Fearless Records saw them, you know, he was more of like a pop punk guy, and normally that would bring up a lot of red flags to a band like At the Drive-In. These guys with strict DIY principles, okay? And Fearless Records was like, hey, At the Drive-In, we would like to do something with you. And At the Drive-In was like, you know what? That sounds good to me. And as the story goes, it was hard to rein in this band to capture that chaotic live energy, and they only had so much time in the studio, so they had to maximize their minutes. When they went in to record In Casino Out, they did a lot of live takes, and it really shows. The rough edges and imperfections are what make this record so good. And it's clear that they were ahead of their time and on their way to be the next biggest rock and roll band. After every label said no to them except for Fearless, they started growing out their signature locks. And they stayed strong in it, no matter how many people made fun of them, no matter how many people called them the Q-tip boys, they wore those giant afros. They let their stuff go natural as kind of a statement, being like, we're in this super white punk rock scene, okay? We're a little bit Hispanic, and we're gonna grow our hair crazy out and just be the most us that we could possibly be. And it gave them such an identity. Everybody knew the At the Drive-In look, the vibe, and the total energy about them. But the larger audiences didn't really seem to gravitate to these guys at first. They got a show with AFI, famously in LA, and everybody just turned their backs on them. It was a very hostile scene for At the Drive-In in LA opening up for AFI. I don't think those AFI fans knew what they had in store for them. And I also don't think they knew what At the Drive-In was capable of on the underground. But Fugazi saw it, you know? Fugazi was one of these bands that At the Drive-In looked up to so much. They wanted to be on Dischord Records more than anything else, but Dischord did things in DC, and pretty much primarily so. So when they got to play a show with the legendary Ian MacKaye, they must have been over the moon. But not only were they over the moon, they took Ian MacKaye's and Fugazi's kind of anti-mosh, anti-stage diving stance, which just made the crowds hate them even more, okay? This is what gave them the reputation of being jerks. This is why they acted like jerks, is because at punk shows, people are there to do that, you know what I mean? So if you go to a punk show as a band and you're you're like, hey, stop doing what you normally do for other bands while we play and go as crazy as possible. If you match our energy, we're going to stop the show and tell you to stop doing the thing that you're here to do. So if they saw anything like this, any people flying through the air, anybody throwing elbows, anybody doing somersaults or cartwheels, they'd shut that shit down as fast as possible. So on one hand, they write the coolest songs, they have the coolest look, they have the coolest energy, they're just up there doing everything as cool as possible. But on the other hand, they're kind of like your Christian dad, okay? They're like, don't do this thing, this is bad, this is for sinners. And I can kind of see where they're coming from with the AntiMosh, no stage diving thing, because they want everybody to have a good time, and when they see people not having a good time because someone's elbow is throwing, they're like, hey, stop doing the thing. But that's not the issue, okay? And that wouldn't have been the way, and it still isn't the way to like control a crowd like that. But things were starting to ramp up because of this tastemaker zine called Buddyhead. They put out this EP called Vaya, and now they have a reputation. So much so that during the dot-com boom in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was this company called Digital Entertainment Network. You know, what a name that is. Digital Entertainment Network. And what they wanted to do was basically be YouTube, I guess, way back when, before there was even such thing as a thing, you know? And this is back in dial-up time, and I don't know if the technology was all the way there yet for this company to succeed, but they wanted to get At the Drive-In stuff out, so At the Drive-In was associated with Digital Entertainment Network. And keep this name in mind, because it's going to come back a little later. One of the first mainstream bands to really fall in love with these guys was Rage Against the Machine, and in particular, Tom Morello, the guitar player. He just absolutely loved them. So when At the Drive-In showed up to play a show with them, they saw Zach De La Rocha like repping hardcore big time. They didn't realize he was in a hardcore band before. They felt instantly at ease. The audience of Rage Against the Machine did not feel at ease and started pelting At the Drive-In with pennies and nickels and stuff. But in walks Ross Robinson, okay? You might not know this guy. This guy's known as the godfather of nu metal. He discovered Korn and Coal Chamber and other such bands, okay? And he too was falling in love with At the Drive-In. He wanted to record At the Drive-In, but he knew his nu metal background was going to send up a whole bunch of red flags with the strictly punk rock At the Drive-In. But the story goes, Ross Robinson went to see At the Drive-In, and he just wept during their performance, absolutely fell in love, and he had no other choice but to approach the band and was like, I know I'm a nu metal guy, I know you don't like that, I know you think I'm not cool at all, look at my little soul patch, I know you don't vibe with that, but just give me one chance. Let me record one song with you, and then we'll go from there. And it went well. Ross is known to like push his artists to their absolute limits, and Ross Robinson was able to capture that raw, frenetic energy of their live performances. He even got Iggy Pop in on the sessions and had him facing back and forth with the vocalist of At the Drive-In, kind of like a passing of the torch type moment. This is a picture of them over here in the studio during that session. Historic times. So the record is done. Relationship of Command. This thing is ready to blow the crap out of the world. But oopsie doopsie, DEN, Den Music Company, or whatever this music group that they were digitally associated with, ended up having to close their doors because of the leaders of that company starting a child ring, okay? So we got a bunch of running this company, and now they're mixed up in a whole like legal case, of course. But now what's At the Drive-In gonna do? Oh no! In walks Mike D of the Beastie Boys, okay? And Mike D at the time has this little label, this little record label known as Grand Royal. It kind of has this like boutique label vibe, but it's backed by major record label money. So it's still kind of very much an indie DIY type thing, but with resources. It's absolutely crazy that this thing exists, and it's absolutely crazy that At the Drive-In is now associated with them. But because they were just absorbed by Den Music Group, it's not selling out whatsoever, okay? It's just like, all right, we're moving from this thing to this thing, and it's Mike D of the Beastie Boys who the band loves, okay? And it's Grand Royal that has more cred than anything going right now, especially under the umbrella of a major record label, and everybody at Grand Royal is falling in love, absolutely head over heels for At the Drive-In. There couldn't be more love for any band ever. These guys are so sure that At the Drive-In are the next Nirvana, okay? They're the next The Beatles. These guys are going to be the next rock and roll group that's at the very, very top of the world, okay? And everybody put everything they had behind them. They were even going out on the late night shows. Of course, they were doing Letterman, they were doing Conan, and eventually they went out to Australia to do this thing in 2001 called the Big Day Out Festival. And this festival is drama. There is nothing but drama at this festival. So how can I break this down? Okay, we got, let's say, at the drive-in, going to be playing a show. But before that, on another stage, we got Mudvayne playing a show. Now, Mudvayne is whipping the crowd up into an absolute frenzy. And by the time that absolute frenzy is done with Mudvayne, they're trying to transfer their energy to another set. And that next set was at the drive-in. Their fans are not moshing. Their fans are doing no circle pits. They're just vibing. So at the drive-in sees all these Mudvayne people coming over, ruining the time. And this is where they think they're going to be like the principals again and being like, no moshing. So things got kind of disgusting, all right? So by the time Limp Bizkit took the stage, it got crazy, and someone actually ended up losing their life during the melee, and Limp Bizkit felt absolutely horrible about it, and they did a whole show dedicated to her later on here, this Jessica girl. And it's about as sad as a festival story can get. You got Mudvayne at the drive-in, Limp Bizkit, and ultimately the worst ending ever. So it took our boys in At the Drive-In 6 years to get to that tippy top level, to start getting all of that respect that they have earned, that they are due because they were that good, they were that energetic, and they were that charismatic of a band, okay? People were just drawn to them by the time they were out there in front of the big lights. And the big stages were made for these guys. Now there's more of a playground to jump on top of and run around on and just be absolutely crazy on. It finally felt like At the Drive-In were going to be in their element of world domination. But they were like super punk rock. They didn't want to do any interviews. They didn't want to do any press. They didn't want to do anything. Marketing, that was a bad word. So they were really kneecapping themselves a little bit, but kind of in the name of Ian MacKaye, which I don't know most people find respectable, but I sure do. So it took 6 grueling years to get there with 5 very different guys, and the last 6 months was just a tailspin of burnout, okay? After the Big Day Out Festival, At the Drive-In stayed on tour a little bit, and the German fans and European fans were kind of mean to them. They kind of like slashed their tires and stuff like that, made it very, very hard. And then Jim Ward got sick, then Jim Ward got married, and then Cedric left the band, and then they went on hiatus just as soon as all this momentum was happening for the band. And the label was just like, please don't give up. No, what are you doing? How are you doing this right now? You guys are gonna blow up right now and you're just gonna walk away from this? Please, I'm your label, I'm your manager, I'm your tour manager, I'm everybody that's gonna make money off of you guys being that big, and we can't believe that you're leaving. But ultimately, they had to leave because it was best for their mental health or whatever, which is great, I think, because at the time, these guys were at each other's throats and on very many drugs. So kind of during that hiatus, they realized, okay, we gotta like separate into 2 factions. So Cedric and Omar, the crazy ones, went off to start the Mars Volta, and Jim and the gang went to start the more normal Sparta, okay? They kind of acted as 2 competitive factions, but in hindsight, kind of the Mars Volta won that one. And then Grand Royal went bankrupt. So now these 2 bands that were in separate factions didn't have an At the Drive-In to go back home to, so now it was over. 6 years of grind just flushed down the toilet like that. So no, these guys didn't sell out. They stayed very strict to everything that they believed in and did everything their way no matter what anybody thought about them, which makes them one of the most punk bands to ever get that popular. But they only got to enjoy being that popular for such a brief period of time. If it was longer, they'd be held in the same breath as Nirvana, as Blink-182, as Green Day. They would be that big. But instead, they're kind of just like this niche band that mean a lot to a few people. And yeah, they do mean quite a bit to me. And in my opinion, the Mars Volta and Sparta are nothing in comparison to At the Drive-In. At the Drive-In is just a way better band by leagues. But that's gonna do it for me here today. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Ring the bell if you're cool as hell. And until my next upload, you can watch another upload.